Lupus LA would like to thank our generous sponsors for their support of the Your Story, Our Fight podcast. Mallinckrodt Pharmaceuticals is focused on managing complexity and improving lives. Emerge Business Solutions serves as a personal and professional CFO for clients across a wide spectrum of industries. They handle financial affairs with integrity and transparency. Gemini Beauty believes in beauty for a cause, and in their case, the cause is lupus. The team at Gemini is changing the skincare game for good. Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Lupus LA podcast, Your Story, Our Fight. I'm your host, Adam Selkowitz, and as always, I want to thank our incredible sponsors for allowing us to share these important lupus stories. Today's story is being brought to you by our guest, Melissa Walker. Melissa has just emerged from 12 feet of snow in Lake Arrowhead to be able to do this podcast. We had to postpone once because she was trapped in her house. So I'm excited that you're here and excited to hear your story. Thanks for joining the podcast, Melissa.
Yes, thank you for having me. It's nice to be here. I'm glad to be on your podcast.
Of course. What I love about this sort of full circle relationship is at one point you volunteered for Lupus LA back in the day. And so I love that you were getting to tell your story in particular, because we have so many volunteers over the years who all were lupus patients, but we didn't really, it's hard to get to know you because we were, really busy with the event and things like that. But I'm really pleased that we get to tell your story. So tell us a little bit about where your lupus story begins.
Okay. Well, my autoimmune condition started in 2002 when I was diagnosed with Graves' thyroid disease. And then after radioiodine ablation therapy, then I no longer have any thyroid function. And then 3 years later was when I was diagnosed with systemic lupus and rheumatoid arthritis at the same time. So I had been in the emergency room several days consecutively. And when they realized that I was not sleeping, I was in so much pain that it actually hurt to have things touching me. It hurt to be leaning back against the couch, and it hurt to be lying down. I was in the emergency room several days consecutively. And when I saw the same doctor 24 hours later, she said, I need to call in someone else here. I've exhausted all of the efforts. And so at that time, they determined that I had systemic lupus and rheumatoid arthritis. Mm-hmm.
And what was your initial symptoms? Just body pain?
It was body pain, extreme exhaustion, and yes, a lot of joint pain, muscle pain, and extreme exhaustion. And then not being able to sleep also. So extreme exhaustion, but I could sleep maybe an hour and a half or 2 hours and then just be awake the rest of the night in pain. And that went on for several weeks. Looking back, after learning more about lupus, my family and I think that we saw some signs and symptoms years earlier that we couldn't explain. But I got the diagnosis in 2005. Mm-hmm.
What were some of those early symptoms that you look back on and realize now were connected?
Sometimes I would have like flu-like symptoms, but they would hit so suddenly, like I would be fine. And then all of a sudden I just have to lie down and just take a rest or, like maybe a day or two. It would either like even in high school. And we thought, oh, okay, maybe it's just the flu. So we kind of brushed it off as something that would be common. We didn't think it was anything uncommon. I did notice shortly after high school that I started having some times where it actually felt like the bottom of my lungs was sticking to my diaphragm. So sometimes I would have some sharp, severe pain there, but I never, I didn't get any diagnosis for that. So sometimes some of the things we kind of look back and think, oh, that may have been associated or that may have been early signs.
In all my years, I've never heard a symptom described quite like you just described it. Oh. The lung, feeling that your lungs were sticking to your diaphragm. I think that's a very specific symptom.
Yes.
But so tell me about, in your life, kind of where were you when you got the diagnosis?
So when
like what part, after college, et cetera, yes. Right?
So it was between my college and graduate school years. So I got the diagnosis actually the year before I was applying for graduate school. And so it was right in there. So fortunately, at that time, I was working with my family on house renovations and things while applying for graduate
Hmm.
school. So I guess I would say that came at a fortunate time when I wasn't fully loaded with classes and in school at that time.
And what did you study in college?
I did neuroscience for my undergraduate and then medical neuroscience for my PhD.
So you really had some level of medical knowledge, even from college. Did that play any part in kind of your diagnosis or um, sort of how you approached lupus and the diagnosis?
It did not influence how I really approached lupus because I was not familiar with lupus. And
Hmm.
there was a woman that lived in our cul-de-sac in Simi Valley that had lupus, but I knew that she was ill and I heard what it was once, but I really wasn't familiar with it. And at that time, I didn't go to the internet and start looking it up to read more about it. But then when I was diagnosed with it, then that's when I started trying to dig into it, read more about it, learn as much as I could. But rheumatoid arthritis does run in my family on my paternal side. So that I had
Hmm.
some knowledge of. Hmm.
And so tell me, so you're applying to grad school, you get this diagnosis. Does that make you think for a second, oh, can I move forward with what my dreams are and what my plans are, or how did that transition happen?
It did. It made me wonder whether I could keep up the pace that I felt like I had always kept up with my work. I try to work as hard as I can. I try to always be very focused and determined. And it made me wonder if I was going to be able to keep up with that. And it also made me wonder if it made me wonder if it was going to slow me down.
Hmm. And so, but you continued with your plan sort of unchanged and just decided, okay, I'm gonna go until I can't go anymore.
Yes, I did. Yes.
And so tell me, give me a little bit about what are you studying? What's medical neuroscience specifically?
Okay, so in medical neuroscience, it encompasses neurodegenerative diseases. It encompasses trauma like spinal cord injury, traumatic brain injury. So it encompasses just about everything with the nervous system. And so my focus for my PhD was on spinal cord injury, traumatic spinal cord injury.
Hmm.
I did a 2-year postdoc once I returned to California on traumatic brain injury. So that,
Okay.
mhm, yes.
So as a lupus patient throughout all of that studying and learning and how much of that, I mean, I know they're not connected really, but obviously when you're studying all aspects of the nervous system in the human body, and how much did your lupus kind of influence your learning or your thought process about medicine in general?
Well, it helped me to be able to see things from a patient side. So it's interesting because, when I'm learning in research and in medicine, doctors are always determining non-compliance from patients not being compliant to take their medications. But what is interesting is that most of the doctors prescribing those medications are not on them themselves. So the awareness
Hmm.
of how nasty some of the side effects can be or how rough it can be is not always there. And so that helped me to, so I can see both sides. I can see the people that are trying to treat the conditions, but also see it from the patient aspect as well. Hmm.
Right. I mean, if you prescribe a medicine that causes nausea and you don't realize how that affects your daily life as a patient,
Hmm.
and you're
Yes.
saying, well, why does this patient not take this medicine?
Right.
That's going to solve her problem. But if it causes more problems, it becomes, it's a real balancing act, especially because most lupus patients are on multiple medications,
Hmm. Yes.
um, which I know you and I talked briefly about that before in the sense that, um, and maybe I'm jumping the gun here in terms of our timeline, but you really worked hard to get your medication count way down.
Hmm.
Um,
Yes.
and so I know we're going to talk about supplements and how you use those to do that. But tell me, before we get to that part, after you graduated with your PhD, where did that take you? And what I guess during your schooling, during your PhD, how was your lupus managed? And did you feel it was under control? Did you feel like you had to really battle back and forth? What was that experience like?
So the intensity of graduate school, which I think anybody that goes to graduate school feels it. It varies, it fluctuates. Some days are better than others, some weeks are better than others, but the intensity of it and the long-term goal of always chasing that carrot, then that stress and the intensity of that was rough on my lupus. So I had periods, I would try to always work through it, and then it got to the point about, let's see, about 5 to 6 years in, I got to the point where my lupus was not doing very well, and we had to change my medications and then start adding quite a bit of medications. And that was when there were times where I was missing going into lab, going into work. Excuse me. Everyone that worked with me knew that if I was not there, I must be really sick, because I tried not to miss being there and doing my work.
Mm-hmm.
But there were times, and I also was adjusting to living in Indiana from California. So with the winter and things, I had not had pneumonia before that. So I had several times that I had pneumonia, or with chest pains, going to the emergency room, and it ended up being pericarditis or endocarditis. So that was, it was a stressful time. And I think the intensity of graduate school was exacerbating it. And one of the things that I learned during that time is, I think some of us forget that if we lose or gain weight, it actually is really important that we let our doctors know. Because a minute ago, when you were speaking about the nausea, medication, the dosages can really be impacted by a person's body weight. So even if a person is losing weight and they think, oh, well, I will just update my doctor at my next appointment. Well, it's actually more important to update them right away, because they may need to adjust the medication dosages with body weight
Mm-hmm.
fluctuates.
That's a really important point. I think that's a good tip for everybody for sure. Did you ever get to the point where you thought, I can't finish this grad school, I can't go forward? Or it seems like your determination is pretty solid, and I commend you for that. But did it ever get to that point?
It did. It did. At least 5 or 6 times I thought about stopping graduate school, but I have other people that I've spoken to, including professors. They said they think that almost all graduate students get to that point at least, 4 to 6 times during graduate school, where they think, okay, I'm finished here. So
Right.
how much of that was my lupus versus just graduate school being stressful in general, I cannot really say. But yes,
Mm-hmm. Makes sense.
I think that really
But
helped.
I think
Mhm.
go ahead.
I think that really helped me, knowing that, okay, maybe this is not my lupus. Maybe everybody feels like this.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm sure too, if you feel that way based on the schooling, but then you get some sort of a flare, not that it's an excuse, but it is sort of the thing you can rely on. I mean, I battle with that too, where it's like, well, I don't want to use the lupus as an excuse for anything, but if in fact I'm not feeling well, then it's legitimate, you know?
Right. Yes, right. So yes, I definitely had times where my lupus was, it just, sometimes when it knocked me flat on my back, and I just had to not be there for a day or two, or however long that, to recover and then make it back. hmm
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Well, I really admire your grit and determination. I think it's really impressive. And so, where after grad school you landed
Back.
back in California?
Yes, back in California. Moved back from
And
Indianapolis to the LA area. hmm And
doing
then,
the postdoc. And now, where are you now? What are you working on?
so now I'm doing medical writing, and I'm able to do
Uh-huh.
that remotely. And I really enjoy that as well. So I'm still in the neuroscience field. So I'm doing medical writing for a brain stimulation device company.
Got it. And what was the first career or job out of grad school after the postdoc? Where were you in a different style of employment?
I have.
In other words,
So
not working from home. Yeah.
yes. So between grad school and my postdoc, I actually worked teaching fun science experiments to children in the LA area. and then
I
shifted.
like that.
Yeah, thank you. I did too. I really enjoyed that. And then did my postdoc. And then after my postdoc, I've been doing technical writing and medical writing, as well as I was back at the bench in 2021 as well.
Hmm.
Bench science.
And so, is there a major difference in sort of the amount of lupus flares or lupus activity that you've noticed when you're able to work remotely
Mhm.
versus having to be in a position where you're either teaching kids or on the bench or, that kind of thing?
Yes, yes. And I think that the driving in the traffic, it's stress is really what influences the most. So not driving in the traffic or not needing to drive at all, that's really beneficial. It's beneficial for me, and
Hmm.
it's much better on my lupus. Hmm.
And do you think you made some of the career choices you made based on the lupus, or was the lupus sort of a secondary factor in kind of you wanted to do this kind of job and this kind of, hold these kind of dreams and that kind of thing?
It was definitely a consideration. I wouldn't say it's a
Hmm.
driving factor. It's worked out nicely that I enjoyed the writing aspect of my work and decided that I wanted to shift into that. And then it just worked out nicely that helps my lupus to be at the best that I can
Hmm.
for my health. It's the best for my health and my health conditions. Hmm.
I think that's a really good example to set in terms of, I think people feel sometimes that they have to choose, I can do this career, or I can't do this career based on my lupus. And I
Hmm.
think in a lot of circumstances, you can find a way to accommodate
Hmm.
both, and I think
Right.
you've done a really nice job in that. All right. So we're going to talk all things supplements and how you sort of transformed your care, really by doing your own research, which obviously, if you've listened to the first half of this podcast, Melissa is a research expert. So we're going to come right back after a quick break and talk about how you made that transition.
Please visit our online store at lupusla.org. By purchasing Lupus LA products, you are directly supporting lupus patients and their families. For more information, visit lupusla.org.
We are back on the Lupus LA podcast, Your Story, Our Fight, talking to Melissa Walker, who's a medical affairs writer and a PhD. And we were talking about research and we're talking about supplements. So tell me kind of what that journey, I know you have a really specific kind of journey you went on.
Hmm.
Starting, you were on 12 different medicines. And
Hmm.
so, all right, you're on these 12 medicines. What goes through your mind and what's that transition like?
Okay. Yes, when I finished graduate school, I was on 12 oral medications daily and then two weekly injectables. One was the methotrexate, low dose chemotherapy, and then the Benlysta as well. And
Mm-hmm.
uh, when I moved back to California, I started on the pre-probiotic, which really helped to regulate digestive tract because my digestive tract has never seemed to be very regular. And so, in speaking to a GI doctor, we realized that my digestive tract just was not regular. So I started on a pre-probiotic, and I felt like that definitely helped. And then someone recommended an apple cider vinegar capsule to me, and I started on those. I didn't really feel an impact with those, but I was always somewhat mesmerized and awed when I would meet somebody with lupus that said they were not on lupus medications. I had a really difficult time wrapping my mind around that, how that was possible. And supplements, I was always very skeptical of supplements because I thought, well, they might work for someone, they may not work for someone else, or different combinations of them. I had never had much luck with them except for the pre-probiotic. And so I thought, but I should, I wanted to read more about them, especially when the COVID pandemic started. That made me very, very nervous because I had more than one autoimmune health condition. And then I was on these immunosuppressants. And so the pandemic made me very nervous. And even the vaccine itself, I wanted to read about that, but there's just so much that was not known about this virus, the vaccine. So at that time, I talked to my rheumatologist about starting to, I let her know what I wanted to do about taking supplements. And she said that we would check my blood work more frequently to make sure everything was staying in check liver function. And she said if I would keep her updated, then I could do that and start working to get off of or lower the dosage and try to get off of some of my lupus medications. And so since January or February of 2020, I now am down to 4 prescription medications daily, no weekly injectables at all. And one of those prescriptions is the thyroid supplement replacement. So that one I will always need to take. And then the other 3, I feel like they help with my conditions. So what I do is I always make sure to wait at least 3 to 4 weeks before adding a new supplement, because if I start to feel badly or something goes wrong, I need to figure out which one it is, and I don't want to have started multiple at once. So I only start one new one at a time and add it in. And I try to read as much as I can about the supplements before adding any, and then talk to my doctor as well, because I have tried things like, for instance, when I lived in Indiana, I tried a peach aloe bottled juice, and I actually could not get out of bed for 3 days except to get some water and use the restroom. That just knocked me out for 3 days, and my rheumatologist said it was likely that the aloe did something to stimulate my lupus. And so I know that people need to be careful, even if something's all natural, it comes from a plant, it's a supplement. I know people need to be very careful with that and talk to their rheumatologist and their doctors about it. But one by one, I've added things in, like a turmeric ginger capsule that I take daily. And with that one, the ginger helps so that the turmeric does not cause acid reflux. I noticed the turmeric capsules alone caused me acid reflux that was intolerable. So I found one that was a turmeric ginger capsule, and then odorless garlic and blueberry. And I think if I had a perfectly healthy diet, I probably would not need many of these supplements, but I do not have a perfectly healthy diet, as most people do not.
I do not either. That is my biggest. I literally had a physical yesterday, and the whole conversation was about my terrible diet. And I was like, well, how do we work around it? Because changing my diet has been really a challenge for me. And it's really my only vice. So, but I think I want to unpack it a little bit, because I think you said some really interesting things. Number one, and first and foremost, as a lupus organization, my message is always check with your doctor. Don't do these things. Don't stop and start medicines on your own without consulting your doctor. I think that's really important. And, officially Lupus LA, we don't recommend or not recommend one thing or the other, because it really is a doctor-patient relationship. But I think you did it the smart way. That's my personal opinion. And I think it's amazing that you've been able to withdraw from some of these medicines, especially the more toxic ones. And I want to know, so how many supplements are you on now?
So right now I take between 25 and 30. And instead of taking them 7 days a week, I rotate a little bit. So I make sure that I take them at least 5 out of the 7 days a week. And by doing that, then I end up taking about 20 of them per day instead of all of them. It's a lot.
And are some of them multiple pills?
Yes, some of them, like the turmeric ginger. Yes, some of them are multiple pills. But I used to take about 6 different ones at night to help with sleep, because my sleep has been quite poor. And I recently have found where some of that are available have 5 or 6 of those in it. So for instance, there's one called Somnipure, and that has the melatonin, the L-theanine, lemon balm, valerian root, and passion flower. So instead of taking all those individually, I can take something that has all of those and find to see if it works for me. So that helps. And every time I'm taking these and I feel like, oh, this is so many, I think to myself, but at least it's not the harsh medications that I used to take with side effects. So it encourages me, because it is a lot. And what I do is I take some in the morning, some midday, and then I have mine at night. That helps instead of all at once.
And how did you find all these? Like, how did you add? And is it just simply research, or do you have somebody that is assisting you in sort of the process?
Well, my rheumatologist is definitely assisting me to make sure that what I'm doing is safe. And then when
Mm-hmm.
I hear about something, if I hear in the news, oh, magnesium helps with, maybe leg cramps, and potassium helps with leg cramps, or magnesium is good for the brain. When I hear something, I bookmark it so that when the moment I have a break and I can come back to it, I start reading about it. And then I try to read as much as possible to see, is that possibly going to be beneficial for me. And then when I'm
Mm-hmm.
looking at supplements, I like to look online and look at ratings. So, maybe 15,000 or 50,000 or whatever people have rated, so that I know. And another thing with supplements is, even if something's all natural, or if it's a vitamin that other people take, what I discovered with the niacin, with the vitamin B6, I I took that and I saw that it had good ratings. I think like 12,000 people had given it 4.5 out of 5 stars. I ordered that brand. But then when I took it, I felt like my skin was on fire. And I was trying to figure out what occurred. And I looked at the bottle and it said it was 1,233% of a daily value. And I thought, I do not need 1,200% of a daily value of this. So I realized it was just
Right.
too high, and other people may be taking that, but that did not work for me. Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. So you feel like your body's very sensitive, and you can really. And now, if you take something that you don't notice a difference,
Mm-hmm.
do you then stop it,
No,
or?
no. So there are some that I take, like the apple cider vinegar. I do not specifically feel a difference. There are some, or the resveratrol. I'm not sure that I feel a difference with that. But if my
Mm-hmm.
doctor checks my liver function and does the blood work, if um, if if everything looks good with those, and I'm feeling good with overall with what I'm with my lupus and what I'm doing, then I think, okay, I may not specifically feel an effect, but that's okay, because I feel like things are moving in the right direction. Whereas some of them, oh, I'm sorry.
No, no, go ahead.
Some of them, like the turmeric and ginger, some of them I actually can feel a difference. If I get off of it, then I have more pain in my hands. I have more aching in joints. Mm-hmm.
So I guess my question is, because I'm assuming you don't really, if you could avoid it, you don't want to take 20 pills a day, right?
Right.
So at some point, how do you then, do you feel like, yes, I understand the prescription medicine is probably much more toxic and dangerous,
Mm-hmm.
or not dangerous, but more taxing on the body.
Mm-hmm.
Is the ultimate goal to see how few supplements you could also be on? In other words, like, can you get down to the 4 medications and 5 supplements, or is it not really? It's more about just adding value and fixing the health problem, and then the supplements aren't really dangerous. So the idea is, okay, it's not going to hurt me if if I'm taking all this.
No, I would like to. So I try to take supplements out if I feel like I'm replenishing that with eating healthier. So I'm always striving to try to eat healthier and to try to get more exercise, because those are two,
Mm-hmm.
especially the exercise. That's where I definitely need to work on it. So I'm always striving to
Well,
work
when you're
on.
buried in 12 feet of snow in the
Yeah,
middle of Lake Arrowhead, it's pretty hard to get any exercise done, right?
right, right. Yes. So I'm always working on those. And I think through exercise, and then, but also eating healthier, then hopefully that will help if I know I'm getting something through my diet. So for instance, if I'm drinking enough green tea during the day, then I may not need to take the green tea capsules, things like that, the fresh
Got it.
fruits and vegetables, things for antioxidants.
And is there one sort of go-to place or website that you go to that you really trust about finding what the right supplements are for you?
Well, I order almost all of mine through Amazon, and that is because I can
Mm-hmm.
check the rating. So I feel like I'm getting something that's good quality. But as far as knowing which ones I'm going to look for on there to order, that I usually do. I look different places online to read about it. It may be a medical publication about it, or it may just be what I can find through different clinical websites like Mayo Clinic and things like that. So I don't have a specific website that I go to that talks about all the supplements. I look in various places for that information. Mhm.
And so tell me the difference between 12 medications and 2 injectables. How do you feel now with the 4 medications, no injectables, and lots of supplements?
I feel better now than I have felt in almost 15 years. I feel really good.
That's amazing.
Thank you. And my blood work is looking really good. My doctors are very pleased that I've been able to do this and that I'm doing it safely by checking with my rheumatologist. And yes, so I'm very happy about that.
So what advice do you want to give to somebody who may want to try, like, where do they start?
They start at their doctor. So talking to their rheumatologist and saying, okay, these are the medications that I'm on. Is there something I could do? And the doctor may say, okay, well, like for cholesterol, it's exercise as well, not just what we're eating or what we're taking. So talking to the doctor and saying, I really would like to try to make some lifestyle changes. What can I do? And then starting to read about different supplements. Like the antioxidants are a huge one for me for my lupus. And if I ever thought that I might get down to only one supplement, it probably would be the turmeric ginger, because I feel like that has had the most impact on my joint health and pain with the flexibility and things with my joints. But talking to the doctor and then just trying to get online and read about the different supplements that are out there, what they're good for, and whether that it may help that person. Mm-hmm.
Excellent. Well, I very much appreciate it. I have one more question for you. Can you tell me why sharing your lupus story is important?
Okay. I feel like it is important because, like I said earlier, when I first heard people that said they were not on any lupus medication, that was unfathomable to me. I could not wrap my mind around how that was even possible. I just, up to that point, my experience was that, okay, once a person has lupus and you're on these medications, that it's not, without medication, I didn't think it could improve that to that degree. But I now realize how important eating healthy, and if you're not getting the nutrients through the diet alone, having supplements that help with the nutrients and the vitamins, minerals, and things, how much that can impact our daily lives with lupus in a positive way.
Excellent. Terrific. Melissa, I so appreciate you telling your story and sharing it, and all of this incredible knowledge that you have built up over the years. Thank you for your previous volunteer work with Lupus LA. We'd love to have you back. And really appreciate you joining us today.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
On behalf of the entire team at Lupus LA, we thank you for joining the Your Story, Our Fight podcast. Please tune in, spread the word, and come back for more inspiring lupus stories. I'm your host, Adam Selkowitz, wishing you good health, and to always remember, your story is our fight.